glad that some of you are joining us on Facebook, and we want to explain to you that we will also have this on YouTube, the Graduate Center for the Study of Early Learning. Over the next several months, we're going to have decision makers in early childhood in conversation. So we wanted to start with one of the primary leaders and advocates, as well as a legislator, to open up our session for us. And every week we will have a different person, but we will have these archived, so if someone missed a session, they can come back and listen to it. But today I'm so excited that Senator Brice Wiggins, who represents District 52 in our state Senate, is with us. He has quite a lot of duties while he's in Jackson. He oversees the Senate Medicaid Committee, and that's one of the state's largest budget items. He serves on the Appropriation and Education Committees with the Senate and is Vice Chair of the Senate Public Health Committee. He was the lead author on the 2013 Early Learning Collaborative Act, and that is our first state early care and education pre-K program. So I cannot thank you enough, Brice, for taking a few minutes to visit with us. And I'd like to ask.
Well, sure. Let me say that may have been our fault. I've since updated my bio there, and now Judiciary A Chairman. And while I do serve on the Public Health Committee, I'm on Appropriations, as I have been. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Well, where you are in my mind is the architect and the champion for early care and education, and that being the lead author of the 2013 Early Learning Collaborative Act. And it was quite a glorious day for us to finally see some state funds that would be dedicated for the purpose of our youngest children that prior to school age. But I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that and how you became interested in how you see yourself as such a now an advocate as well as a leader for early care and education.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And yes, that was a momentous, I think, occasion when we passed that into law in 2013. And as we've gone on since then, I've only become, become more assured of that as I see how things are progressing and how it's progressing. And that was and is Mississippi's first foray into early education, which means that the legislature stepped up and obligated really state funds to support early education. And as the name says, it's a collaborative act, meaning that as many of the early education supporters and teachers and advocates know, the best education we can do for our really birth to 5 is in a collaborative manner. And one thing I'm certain of, and that is on the state level and mainly generally in politics, that not many things get done collaboratively. But what I think you're seeing with the success, and I'll talk about that in a minute, of the program is the collaborative nature of it, and that's leading to the success. But just a little bit how I got into it, in my district that I'm from, which is on the Gulf Coast, and in South Jackson County, we of course have Chevron, which is not only the state's but the country's largest refineries. And Chevron is a great corporate citizen for us, and they began a program called Excel by 5. And to go back even further, during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina around 2005, what became clear to not just me, but many people was what the importance of childcare and the importance of early education. And that's because Katrina, it literally wiped out all the child care centers, certainly in my town of Pascagoula, but all along the coast. And that is where, children were going, parents were taking their children because they had to work and they were getting the education and so forth, and the schools were out. So at that time, and I had two kids in that realm. I'm sorry, that realm in childcare at the time. And Chevron after Katrina stepped up and helped to get those back online. And then along with that came out the Excel by 5 program, and Pascagoula became the largest Excel by 5 certified program. And at the time, I was an assistant district attorney prosecuting felony crimes. And I really got tired of prosecuting kids and sending them to prison. And these were kids. The last trial I did, jury trial, was sending a 14-year-old to prison for murder. And one of the things that I saw that was a consistent thing was how the education was not being, kids were in the criminal justice system because they had not completed their education, to put it succinctly. And so how could we address those things? And so when you combined all of that, started working on it, and I became chairman of the first Excel by 5 program in Pascagoula, which was the largest at the time. And we got together, community members created that. So then when I got elected to the Senate, I wanted to take that with me and somehow replicate that, a version of that on the state level, which became the Early Learning Collaborative Act of 2013. Now, it wasn't just me. When I got up there, to be honest, I was kind of the only one that was touting it because certainly within Republican circles, it was not something that was on the forefront. But I saw the importance of it. And one thing that we had known was that, or we saw, was that it was very favorable amongst many parts of the state. And actually the statewide Chamber of Commerce, MEC, had done separately some polling on that and saw the data. So come into the legislature, and I was raising the issue, and it turned out that Rachel Cantor from Mississippi First, who had just gotten started, had heard me. We didn't know each other. And after hearing me raise the issue about early education, she approached me and said they had done a study and had looked at a collaborative model from really kind of Oklahoma and somewhere. So we started thinking about it and talking about it. And really that was 2012. The next year, Chairman Gray Tollison of the Education Committee, who I'd been talking to him about it, and who actually was a supporter of early education, said, go for it. And so we crafted the bill and really got it through the legislature of a bipartisan nature, and with support from not only your educators and childcare supporters or childcare business owners, but also from Head Start, from business owners, from your preachers, from all the folks that see this on a regular basis. So it really was unique that it came about that way. And since that time, it has only gotten better and better. We put a lot of accountability into the model and to the program, and it's gotten better and better. And when we started that program, it started with working with now Mayor Barker from Hattiesburg, who was in the House at the time, Toby Barker. We were able to get about, I think it was around $3 million to start the collaborative program. And then over the last number of years, we've been able to increase that to the point where, if I'm trying to get my numbers right, we're up into the $13 million range of the collaborative, and to the point where the lottery legislation that authorized Mississippi's lottery, after the first 80 million, the remaining amounts go to education, with the majority of that going to the Collaborative Act. if you would have told me that that's where we would be really 8 years later from where we started, I would have told you you're crazy. And on top of that, we have been recognized literally as top 5 in the country in early education based on our quality and what we're servicing. So people have from across the nation have looked at us as to what we are doing and have been doing in the Collaborative Act and have recognized us for that. And the details are in the data, because all of the children on our kindergarten readiness assessment programs are showing that those who are in the collaborative model, in the collaborative programs, are scoring ready for kindergarten and much higher than those who are not in such a program. And just to kind of summarize what I just said in a way, and then certainly let you ask questions, is the purpose of the program was to create a high quality early education program. And that meant having evidence-based curriculum. That also meant having access to the Head Start children, or giving access to Head Start children, but requiring them to reach the level that the state had set. And what the program does says, the state says, if you're going to do early education, we want you to, and we're going to give you money, but you're going to need to do it with these high standards based on evidence and based on the research that shows that benefits the children long lasting. So we've been successful. There's some other unique aspects to the program that we could talk about, but in a long nutshell or big nutshell, that's what it's about.
Well, I am going to ask you to talk about one of what I consider to be unique and very innovative pieces of that legislation, and that has to do with the ability that individuals can help communities in their funding match through state income tax. And I think that that's probably the only, as far as I know, Mississippi's the only state that has been innovative in that regard. So if you could just talk a minute or two about how people can, if you want to call, help to fund the program through directing their state income tax, that would be great.
Yeah, and first, before I answer that question, I should have recognized that you yourself, Kathy, and other early education advocates had educated me on early education and previous attempts in the state of Mississippi. So we wouldn't be here without your support and certainly your knowledge of getting that.
There was a lot of people, like you say, there was a group of folks that really wanted to support the effort.
Yeah, that's right. But the tax credit you mentioned has been called the single best tax credit in the state of Mississippi. And it's a unique part of the program, and that is that within the collaborative law, it allows for any individual or entity to donate to a collaborative, and you get a 1-for-1 tax credit. And so what does that mean? That means, and I use them because they're in my district, and different ones have done it. But if you're Chevron and you give, let's say, $1 million to a collaborative, that means that collaborative gets that $1 million and the state will match it. And then Chevron gets a tax credit. And in fact, it has happened because I'll just say M&M Bank down my way, they selected a number of different collaboratives, gave $50,000 to the collaboratives in different areas. That was matched by the state, and the banks get to have that tax credit on that. And it has been a tremendous success. And really one of our, I call them our gold standards, and that's Pedal. They really took the ball and ran with it in the first year, or the first couple years. They started, and they had people donating to like 75,000. I've been told they're up to 750,000, almost $1 million, where they're getting from individuals in the community. And that goes to fund the program. And let me say this, that it's unique, but it was important because when we started the program or when we drafted the legislation, what we were hearing was that within the early education community, that they didn't have the resources or the money to pay for high quality teachers or the teachers that you needed to. And they didn't have the money to pay for the curriculums that we needed. So what we did was came up with this public-private partnership and said the state will help, and we want to encourage private entities to also help in the education of the future of our children. And so far, that seems to be working in doing that. And also on the tax credit, it has a $1 million cap. So it caps out, you can only get only the $1 million up to that level. And then there's a statewide cap on that. Bottom line is, thanks to this tax credit, that these collaboratives throughout the state have received a lot of funding that they wouldn't have otherwise received. And the state has met its obligation and put money into it. And the biggest thing, Kathy, that I have heard about the tax credit that I think says it all is, I was in Petal when this was first going on, and I asked the folks on the ground there, why are we seeing this happen? And what was told to me, and I've since heard it from other ones, is that people are doing it because the money stays in their community and they know it doesn't go to Jackson, and it's going to the education of our children. And that's been a big incentive. And I think the proof is in the numbers.
You're in a position with the different roles that you are assuming when you go to Jackson, as far as your responsibilities as a senator. And I know that some of these, as you mentioned earlier, kind of cross over as far as judiciary and where you see hopefully the prevention of crime early on in early childhood education. How do you advise us to increase the public awareness of connections between the importance of a quality education starting at early years and how children can move forward in their high school and on into either a trade or a college education? Because so many times people think, well, those little bitty ones, they're really not learning at this point, and they don't assume that they start learning until they're in elementary school. So how would you advise some of us to frame this or talk about this when we're in public, trying to talk to folks who may not be as knowledgeable as you are? And what are some tips you could give us?
So I had to get knowledgeable myself. And I would first say, to the analogy that you make, what people need to realize is that the brain learns more in the first 5 years than it does any other time. And that's supported by the brain research that has gone on over the last 20 to 25 years. And I'm sure you know that yourself. And so as we addressed it in the legislature, if you're looking for a return on investment, it makes a ton of more sense to put your resources in at the start than it is at the end. Okay, that's just kind of kind of an economics type way to look at it. But another way to look at it is certainly the Collaborative Act, but also all the studies of high quality early education show it's not just about what the child learns. It's about all the other things that go along with it, from being healthy, from being, having screenings, from the environment that they're in. And the reality is that not all of our children, in fact, a lot are not in such situations. And they can get that from the early education that provides the foundation from the learning that makes them and allows them to thrive later on. And the proof is in the numbers. When we started the Early Learning Collaborative Act, combined with some other reforms, the performance of our children has really skyrocketed. And so we owe it to our children to give them the best so they can compete not only now, but as they continue to grow and really go off into the educated world, if you will. So how do you convince people? I think that it's a duty that we have, but the numbers show it. And if you're talking about the government having a role to play in it, there's no better return on investment than early education within the education community that I can tell. And I've been a member of the Senate Education Committee. And so from the standpoint of, you mentioned the crime and things like that, the skills that are gained in the early education program done in a right way can have lasting benefits that hopefully will deter that. Look, it's not unknown that the amount of prison beds have been determined by third grade performance. Okay, they would base that because you can track that, and so you have to change that, and that's what early education and certainly the Collaborative Act does for our children.
If you had a crystal ball, and you mentioned earlier that, who would have thought when this started that we would be where we are today? And we look at other states such as Alabama or Arkansas, where there's a even larger investment in pre-K than what we have currently been able to do, even though what we have done is great and we are celebrating that. Where do you see us in 8 years in terms of, if you could read the future, where would you see us?
Oh, I would love to read the future. I see us having many more, and I can't say a specific number, but more collaboratives throughout the state, and that more folks will understand, more businesses and parents will understand the benefit of early education. From a public policy standpoint, I see it only getting better and better, because when we first started this, nobody talked about it and the people thought we were crazy. And in fact, there were opponents, as you know, many opponents. I can tell you now that at the state capitol, it's considered a program that you no longer have to, what I call, sell, but it's like, it becomes, how much are we going to fund it at? And we're going to continue to do that. And with the lottery proceeds that we've continued to see, and with the way that legislation was crafted, I think you're going to continue to see an increase in the funding. Do we have the amount of funding that other states do? No. Are we working with what we have? Yes. If it was up to me, 100%, I would have an early education, entity that was solely dedicated to early education in the state of Mississippi to oversee this. I'm hesitant to say a whole other state agency, because that gets into some things I'm not really for, because that can lead to bureaucracy and all. But it would be a dedicated state function for this early education that we can continue to grow. So in 8 years, I see us having more money. I see us having more collaboratives, and I see in the general public supporting early education, not just through the collaboratives, but through in everyday life. And I'm talking high quality education, early education.
Well, you've given us a really promising future if it holds true, and we have to believe that there'll be advocates and let me say well-informed public policy folks, just as yourself, because we need more of you. We need to clone you if possible. and I know that it would make your lift not quite so heavy if there were other folks there who could join you, and I'm sure there are who can join in. I think the future is going to be very interesting for not only Mississippi, but for the country, as far as we're preparing children for jobs that don't even exist right now, that will be in the future. And so from a business standpoint, economic development standpoint, I always think about that as, I know one of the things you have to keep your eye on, as do most people in decision-making positions, is how's this going to help us get better prepared for 10 years from now or 15 years from now. So I just want to thank you again for being with us today, and hope that you'll join us again at another time if we're lucky enough to get you to come on with us.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for everything that you've done and for really pointing me in the right direction. You know, it's the old quote, it's amazing what you can do when you don't care who gets the credit. And I'm happy to share the credit. I'm glad to have played my role and to continue to do that. But it takes all of us in getting us moving in the right direction. But I told this to somebody when I was doing another interview. Us advocates and legislators, we get all up into the weeds of the process and all that. But at the end of the day, when you strip it, it's about the children, and it's about the future of our children and what we're doing to make their life where they can be thrive as they get older. So that's what it's all about.
Well, thank you again so much for being with us, and we look forward to you down the line in January and February, keeping us informed of the progress that you're going to be making along with some others. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Kathy. Appreciate it.